I got another ball of clay, centered and open, and I'm going to bring up my walls, and I'll show you a couple more problems that will occur while you're learning how to throw. One of the problems is allowing your pot to flare out. That's usually the most common problem when you're trying to make your cylinder forms, is you pull out on it. What you really want to do is, if you can imagine a small dot floating right up here at the top, you're pushing in and up, trying to bring the walls of clay to that point that floats up here. If you allow your clay to flare out, you have to try to bring it back in. And what you're going to do is called collaring, or choking the clay back down. And it's literally, you're grabbing it and squeezing, just like if you were choking something. You want to have your hands very wet and the outside of your clay very wet, and you just give it a squeeze right back in. And you can see that it went from being flared out to being tapered in. This is the shape that you're after right here. If it is pulled out and you need to bring it in, a lot of times I don't like using my entire hand or squeezing like this. What I like to do is I'll use the tips of my thumbs, the tips of my index fingers, and the first knuckle on my middle fingers, and I squeeze with those 6 points of pressure. You can just squeeze like this, and I squeeze it right back in. And if I kept going down and squeezing in, I can close this form off completely. But I'm after a cylinder form, so I'm not going to allow it to close. Another problem is when you come to the top and you let your fingers shoot right off. You can see it's squeezed and pinched and it's misshapen the rim. You can't really get that to go back down by compressing with your sponge and pinching. So again, you need to cut it off. You can use your needle tool, or I'm going to show you another way of cutting it off using your wire tool. This method's a little bit more difficult, but it's one that I really like using. Is you take your wire and you wrap it around your finger so you just have a little bit exposed between your thumbs. With your clay turning, you're going to plunge that wire down below the bad part of the rim, and you're going to cut it completely off. One thing with doing this, you have to be very quick and deliberate. You can't mess around. So just take it, plunge it in, let it make a couple turns, and there you are. You've cut that rim completely off. I'm going to continue bringing my walls up. I make my dent. I raise up, pushing in and raising up. I get to the top, let my pressure off gently, compress that rim back down. Take the water out from the inside. Get everything wet again. I'm going to make one more pull. I make my dent at the bottom. Come in. One of the things I always tell students when they're watching my demos is to pay attention to what I'm doing with my hands and how I'm holding my body. A lot of times a student will get so infatuated with the shape that I'm making, they forget to watch how I'm making it. And if you pay attention, I've always got my arms in and down on my legs. That's really locking me in. It doesn't allow me to have my elbows up here and things get all wobbly. Everything's locked in. Whether I'm centering and I'm leaning to my left, I'm locked in. My arms are against my body and down on my legs, and I can really get that push with my upper body and my weight. When I'm doing my pulls to raise the height up, I'm leaning on my right side, but again, I've still got everything locked in. I may have to raise my left arm up to get my hand down in, especially when I start working with larger pieces of clay and I'm getting taller pots. But everything's still locked right in. Everything, my hands, when I'm centering, you'll notice my hands are together. I'm pushing with both hands. When I'm pulling, my hands are together. I'm pinching with both hands. When I start to get to a pot that's too tall, where I have to put my whole hand on the inside, and this one on the outside, I've still got this arm locked in, and as soon as I get to a point where I can bring that thumb over, it comes right back and touches my hand, and it keeps them working as one unit. I don't want to have my hands out like this because I don't know what I'm doing, I can't feel what I'm doing. When everything's locked in, everything works as one thing. Another thing is where you're pushing on the clay. A lot of times for a demo, I'll really work around to the side so students can see what I'm doing. But typically, if I'm working and I'm throwing some pots, I work right in front of me. If I were to take this wheel and divide it into thirds, I work in the third of that pie wedge that faces me. So if I'm leaning on this side, I'm still within that 1/3 section. If I'm on this side, I'm still on the 1/3 section. Everything's right in front. You don't want to end up with your hands over here or some weird thing where your hands are over here. Always keep everything in front of you because that's where you have the most control.